the perpetrators, the criminals who did this crime against humanity are not accounted for, and what they did, I think they knew what they were really doing. They wanted, it wasn't against only the regime, it was against the country, against the people, against the past, the present, and the future.
As you can see from the title, I divided my talk into two themes relating archaeologically. The first is on awareness, which has been built among the Iraq population since the last century and even before, which seems to have vanished from Iraq after the war. The second theme is on looting archaeological sites that has been going on since the war in 2003 and its catastrophic effect on our cultural heritage. You are going to hear today about certain events that you haven't heard of or read about in books or articles, with my interpretation as an archaeologist who has worked in the Antiquities Service and the Iraq Museum between the second half of the 1960s and early 1970s. These events reflect, in my opinion, a degree of archaeological awareness among the Iraq population. Unfortunately, the values that may be deduced from these events do not seem to exist in Iraq after the war. When I came to Cambridge to do my postgraduate studies, I was asked several times by academicians the same question. Iraq is rich in archaeological heritage. How come we don't see many objects in the antique markets? How do you keep your thousands of archaeological sites untouched? My answer was always the same. There were two main reasons for that. The first is a straightforward one. We have a living-in guard in every important archaeological site up and down the country. The second reason, which I am going to concentrate on, is the high degree of archaeological awareness among the Iraq population. The question that one might ask, where did this degree of awareness come from? There were three reasons, in my opinion, and maybe more. First, when I was at school, our archaeological heritage was embedded in the history books. Things like Iraq is the cradle of civilization, like that. Moreover, school excursions to nearby archaeological sites were among the school program. Beginning in the 1967, with the opening of the new museum in Baghdad, the Iraq Museum had special educational programs for school children. Second, every important archaeological discovery made by the local or foreign expeditions found itself into the radio, newspapers, and the television of Iraq. Third, archaeological excavations carried out by the local and foreign expeditions up and down the country, beginning in the late 18th century, had given the opportunity to the local inhabitants to visit the excavations, seeing for themselves what goes on, and talk to members of the expeditions. Those opportunities must have added some degree of archaeological awareness to the visitors. Moreover, excavations usually employ a large number of local workmen, and at the end of each working day, the workmen would talk to their families, relatives, and friends about their experience in the actual digging and on the objects they may have discovered. At the end of the season, that is excavation season, which may last several months, and for several seasons, the people of those villages, towns, and cities would have a degree of archaeological information and awareness about their heritage. The point of awareness may well be illustrated by the following events. In the early 1970s, the municipality of Mosul city in northern Iraq was building a road between Mosul and Duhok. Near the town of Basitki, which is shown on the map, the blade of a tractor digger unearthed a small part of an archaeological object that shone under the sunlight. The driver stopped the engine and went down to have a closer look at the object. He realized that the tractor may have exposed part of an important object. He went to the nearby tents to tell his bosses the good news. The Antiquity Service in Mosul was immediately contacted, and a team of archaeologists was dispatched to the site. The road work, of course, had to stop for several days until the archaeologist has completed their work. This hollowed copper masterpiece represents the lower part of a nude king, Naram-Sin. His name was Naram-Sin, who ruled the Akkadian Empire between 2210 to 2170 BC. The sculpture is an almost life-size, showing the king squatting on a large circular drum. There are 3 lines of inscriptions on the drum telling us that the sculpture was made for the king, who had a temple dedicated to him in Akkad, which is Akkad in Arabic. That's the capital of the Akkadian Empire. And that Naram-Sin was thus accepted into the world of gods. The driver event tells me 2 things. First, the driver, though his level of education may not have been average, he immediately realized, though only part of the object was unearthed, the significance of his discovery. Fortunately, the driver did the right thing by stopping the tractor and informing his bosses. He could simply have unearthed the object and taken it to the tents with a big smile on his face, thus destroying the context in which the sculpture was embedded. Another event that would show strong responsibility and awareness in an uneasy situation was when the president of Iraq, the then General Arif, wished to pay an official visit to the Shah of Iran in 1967. The president wanted to give the Queen of Iran, Farah Diba, a very precious necklace belonging to the Sumerian Queen Pu'abi, dated 2500 BC, discovered among other magnificent jewelry in her burial tomb at the Sumerian capital U in 1926. So the Director General of Antiquities of Iraq, the late Dr. Faisal Al-Waili, was summoned to the palace, and the president told him about his wish. Dr. Al-Waili replied, "Sorry, Mr. President, like that. I cannot do this. This necklace represents one of our most precious items in the Iraqi Museum, archaeologically and from the point of view of the art. What I can do instead, however, is that I can have it cast in gold, silver, etc." This event reveals to me that Dr. Al-Waili stood up to his responsibility as Director General of Antiquities of Iraq, which was a very brave decision in such a circumstance. That event had added to my belief no Iraqi official, whatever position he or she may have held, including even Saddam Hussein, could mistreat our archaeological heritage. When the unbelievable royal Assyrian hoard of Queen Yaba with the 3 other queens' tombs were discovered at Nimrud in the late 1980s, and the last season was in 1991. Rumor had it that Saddam had given the gold hoard to his wife, just as simple as that. Although I was never pro-Saddam and his party, I stood against the war on Iraq. My reply to that rumor was, Saddam can do anything except for this one. And I was proved right. After the war, the hoard was discovered carefully wrapped and hidden in the safes of the central bank in Baghdad. I'm now going to turn to the second theme, that is the looting of archaeological sites and why it is a crime inflicted on our cultural past. I said earlier that the values of the events I talked about, unfortunately, no longer exist in Iraq. Here is the proof. I'm going to concentrate on the archaeological aspect of the problem of looting and not on the looting of museums. The looting of an archaeological mound is a criminal act inflicted on our heritage. This may need an explanation. The great majority of people do not know exactly how an archaeological mound was built and therefore unaware of the catastrophic damage looters can cause to our cultural past. Archaeological mounds were built over many centuries with successive layers of the rebuilding of villages, towns, and cities on top of each other's remains. This is the site of Eridu in southern Iraq, near Nasiriyah, where was excavated back in the 40s. And we can see this is the temple section of the town. And you can see this is the earliest at the bottom, and then you go up, one built above the other. This is a trench dug, stepped trench, by step trench. So you can see the top one is the latest, and the bottom one is if some looter dug a hole from the top to the bottom, he would go through several layers of temples without knowing where he is, what period he is on or in, I'm not sure, and the objects that he may get doesn't know where it came from, which temple, which house, which city, etc. The successive layers of the rebuilding of villages, towns, and cities on top of each other's remains. Thus, each layer represents, in antiquity, a living village, town, or city containing houses, temples, palaces, shops, roads, burials, cemeteries, etc. Containing also the material objects left behind by the inhabitants. Therefore, any disturbance by looting would destroy not only the chronology of the levels, but also the architecture of the successive villages, towns, cities, burials, etc., with their material objects. In the end, any cultural object removed from its context, this is where the context is important, by looters would lose not only the layer that it came from, but the building, the grave, the temple, the courtyard, etc., and of course its chronology. the market value of such an item would be diminished greatly and sold for what it's worth as an object that has been stripped off completely from its archaeological context. This is why I said earlier that looting of an archaeological mound is a crime on the cultural heritage of any country. Finally, the images of the looted sites that I have shown you suggest to me two things. First, the authorities in Iraq have no control on the countryside at the moment, where organized gangs of site robbers operate from inside and outside the country. Second, the archaeological awareness of Iraqis of their heritage that has been built over centuries seems, unfortunately, to have gone with the looters, one of the very many unfortunate results of the very regrettable war. Thank you.